So permission set is very much like a profile only. This is also collection of permissions, as the name says, right? Permission set. So this is also a collection of permissions. Okay. But why do we need permission set? Permission set is something which you can give to a user uh, as an additional set of permissions. Okay. So this is something which can be given to a user on top of the profile. Got it? For example, uh, let's understand this with the help of a small scenario. Let's say there is a profile that you have created called sales profile. And you have 10 sales reps who have this profile. I have 10 people in the sales team. I've created a profile and I've assigned the same profile to all 10 of them. Okay. Now, in case you have a requirement that one of these sales rep needs additional permissions. Try and understand this very clearly. This is a very practical situation which can arise anywhere. You have 10 people, all 10 of them have same profile. Okay, everyone is in sales team. You may have a situation where one of these people requires additional permissions. Only one of them, not everyone. Then what will you do? What is the solution that we have? Let's say we all are in the sales team, we all are using the same sales profile, we have been assigned sales profile. Sridhar requires a few additional permissions. So what should we do there? What will be the solution? Anyone?
Field permissions.
No, field permissions or tab permission, that is not the question. The question is you require some additional permission. It can be field, tab, object, apps, whatever. You require, we all are using, again understand the situation, we all are using the same. Microphones on mute please. Can you guys please ensure that the microphones are muted? Okay, thank you. Right. So try and understand that question. A profile can be given to multiple users. Let's say we all in this session are a part of the sales team and we all have been given sales profile. XYZ profile, any profile. So let's say sales profile. So we all have same level of permission. Now Sridhar requires some additional permissions. It can be of anything. But we have to make sure that those additional permissions are given only to Sridhar, not to everyone. Then what is the solution that we have? If I put the permission in the profile, then everyone will get that, right? So what is the solution that you guys can think of?
Go to manage users and go to permissions, permission set.
Okay. What will that do? Apart from permission set, let's not talk about permission set as of now. By what we learned yesterday, if I give you that kind of a scenario, created a profile, given it to 10 users, now I say one of these users needs additional permission. How will you guys manage that? What is the best way of managing it? Anyone? No? Okay. Can we create a new profile for that user? Can I create a separate profile for that user? Do you think that will be a solution? Yes, Anju says yes. Okay, so that can be a solution. Okay, while we are only for one user, yeah. Swati says only for one user. Yeah, absolutely. We can create a profile for one user. Okay. So while we are talking about these concepts now, I think yesterday someone was asking that, okay, how do I prepare for certification? Don't focus on things like certification, focus on the concepts, okay? Try and understand the concepts, okay? And this is the best way of understanding the concepts. It's for everyone, okay? You know, what is profile? Profile is collection of permissions. Very easy, okay? So just knowing this much might not be helpful. You need to understand these concepts very clear, and that is what I try to do during the sessions. I try to talk to you regarding the scenarios and all, and try to think about these scenarios and understand them. Right? That if this kind of situation, this is a very common situation, right? That if there is a profile which has been given to 10 people and one or two people need additional permissions, then if I do not have anything, what will I do? I'll create different profile. Yesterday that is what we were talking, right? You can create your own profiles. If you see that there are two people or one person who requires a different set of permissions, which means we need to create a different profile, right? So this can be a solution, but this is not a very good solution. Creating a separate profile for that one user is not a very effective solution. Though it is a solution, and you can work with this, but it is not a very good solution. Why it is not a very good solution? This was how many what do you call this? This was how many profiles will you create? This way is how many profiles you will keep on creating. You might have these kind of requirements, a lot of them, right? And then every time you keep on creating a profile for this kind of requirement, you know, you keep on increasing the number of profiles and you keep on making your system more complex. So though it is a solution, but it's not the best way of doing it. Best way of doing that is using a permission set. Okay, so now permission set is again an collection of permissions. This can be given to users on top of the profile. So this is like a top-up plan. So you have a base plan on your mobile, and then there is a top-up plan, right? Which can be for certain additional features, right? So that is how it is. Profile can be compared to the base plan. So everyone has the same profile in a certain group. One or two users who need additional permissions, we can create a permission set, put those permission in the permission set and assign that permission set to the user. Okay. Now, I was just giving you an example. Let's say we all are part of the sales team. We all have the same profile. Sridhar requires one or two additional permissions. Okay. Let's say along with sales app, he also needs to access HR app. Okay. What we'll do is we will give him the, we'll create a permission set, put the permissions that Sridhar requires. We'll give that permission set to Sridhar. All right. After a month, if the company says, okay, now he does not require the additional permissions anymore, his job is done, I can always go and remove the permission set. That's it. As easy as that. Got it? So that's about the permission set concept. I hope this is clear. So let's see, how do we create a permission set. I'll create a permission set and show it to you. Give me a moment. Okay, so this permission set is under setup, manage users, permission sets. You can click on new. So there are no standard permission sets. You just have to create one. Just click on new, give it any name. Save it. You'll have to put the permissions in this. What permissions you want to put? You want to put some app permission, object permissions, so whatever permission you want to put. Let's say you want to put some assigned apps. Click on edit. Marketing app. Whatever permission you want to allow inside that permission set, just put them. Now this permission set has the permission of viewing this marketing app. Okay. Now if someone does not have the permission of viewing marketing app through his profile, and if we give him this permission set, he gets the permission to view the marketing app. Okay. Now how is it given to the user? It's given to the user from here. You can go to a particular user. Okay. Any user, let's say I want to give this permission set to this user. Click on that username. Scroll down a little. You will see permission set assignment. Okay. So you can click on edit assignments and give this permission set to this user. Enable this permission set. Okay. So that is what we have to do. We'll have to put the permission in the permission set and give it to the user. Correct. So there is a profile which is mandatory, which every user should have, and which is common. And there's a permission set which is again collection of permissions, but this is not mandatory. This depends on our requirement. If there is an exception required, then we will create a permission set and give it to the user. Please let me know if anyone has a question here related to the permission set. And like a user can have only one profile. In case of permission set, one user can have multiple permission sets also. Okay. Yeah. Please let me know if you have any questions here. We're all okay? Great. So now coming to the next part of it, which is the sharing settings. Okay, what is sharing setting? Sharing setting basically, as the name suggests, it has got something to do with the sharing of data. Okay, data sharing. Data sharing is what we have seen, that every record in Salesforce has a record owner. Go to contacts, click on any contact, you will see there is an owner of the contact. See, there is a contact owner. Go to accounts, open any account, you will see that there is an owner of the record, account owner. So whatever data we have in Salesforce, every data has some owner. And I think we discussed about this. Why do we have this ownership concept? Ownership concept is there so that this ownership concept is there so that the data does not go missing, or the data does not go unnoticed. No one is working on it. So Salesforce has a very simple concept that whatever data is being entered into the system, everything should have an owner, so that someone is made responsible for that data. That person is made responsible for that data. He is responsible for tracking, following up, correcting the information, all that stuff. All right. So now what happens with this data ownership is, sometimes because data is being owned by individuals, now there can be situations where the company wants the data to be private, and in situations company might want the data to be public. Private means only the owner will get to see the data. Public means everyone will get to see the data. Okay, let's say we are here, we have Navyata. Let's say we have 4 salespeople. We have Sridhar, we have Anju, and we have Sonu. We have 4 salespeople in the company. She deals with 50 accounts. Naveta has 50 accounts. Sridhar deals with 50 accounts. Anju deals with 50 accounts. Sonu also deals with 50 accounts. Okay. So overall, the company has 200 accounts. Each salesperson is responsible for 50 accounts. Okay. These are all accounts. Ultimately, these are all accounts. All the data is into the accounts table. Okay. So overall, the company has 200 accounts. Correct. Now, sometimes the company will have a requirement that Navyata gets to see only the 50 accounts, the ones that she owns. Okay, she does not get to see all these accounts. She just gets to see what she owns. That is called making data private. Okay, private data. And sometimes the companies may have a requirement that no matter who owns the data, everyone gets to see the data. That is called making the data public. Simple, private and public. Okay, so that's about the sharing settings. So who gets to see the data, or whether the data is shared with everyone or not, that is what we are going to discuss here in sharing settings. Okay, making the data private and public, very simple concept. Okay, now why will a company make the data private? Why will they make it public? That is their way of doing business, or their internal operation management, how they want the data to be shared. That's something which we do not get into. We just have to do one thing. If they say no, we want our data to be private, we'll make it private. We just do the settings so that the data is private. Private means only the owner of the data will get to see it. Others will not get to see. Public means everyone in the company, no matter who is the owner, everyone will get to see, right? So if the data is private, each of the sales rep will have access to only 50 accounts, the ones that they own. If data is public, then each one of them will have access to how many accounts? If it is public, then each one of them will have access to how many accounts? If data is private, then each one of them will get to see 50 accounts, the ones that they own. If data is public, then each one of them will have access to how many accounts?
Then
Sorry? 200. Yes, great. So then each one of them will have access to 200 accounts because it's public. All the accounts are open to everyone, right? So that is how it is. Got it? So under sharing settings, there's this. Okay, just give me a minute. Let me go to sharing settings. So where is this sharing setting concept available? Under setup, under security controls, sharing settings. Okay, so in sharing settings you will see the first concept is called default sharing settings. Okay, and it's also called OWD, organization wide default. So this is a default sharing setting where you make the table private or public, right? You can edit it, you can make it private or public the way you want. Like lead is public, what does it mean? Lead right now is public, what does it mean? Anyone? Access to everyone, yes. So everyone who has access to the lead object, see, the access to the lead object comes from the profile. right? So anyone who has access to lead object will have access to all the leads. That is what it means. Someone who does not have access to lead object, he will definitely not get to see. But someone who has access to the lead object, at least a view access on lead object through his profile, will get to see all the leads, right? But if that is not the case, then you should make it private. Now what does it mean? Only the owner of the lead will get to see the lead, not everyone. Got it? The same way, all the objects are listed here, including account, contact, opportunity. Whatever you want to make public, you want to make private, just go and select that object and make it private or public. Does that make sense? Simple concept. Okay. So this is very much different from what we were doing in the profile. In the profile, we were saying that whether a person can view data inside a certain object or not, or whether he can create data inside that certain object or not, right? So in this case, if I'm talking about the profile aspect, which we discussed yesterday, all four of them should have access to accounts object, right? Everyone requires access to accounts. But once they have access to account, it does not mean that everyone will get to see all the accounts. You have second level of controlling where you might want to control that, okay, people should only see the accounts that they own, or people should see all the accounts irrespective of whether they are the owners or someone else is the owner. Did we get this? Right? So definitely the first level of permission comes from profile, whether the person has access to a certain object or not. Once the person has an access to the object, the second concept is organization wide default or the sharing setting. Whether he gets to see all the data in that object or whether he gets to see the data that he owns, that depends on the sharing settings. Fine. So both these concepts are very important. Alright. So while you're working or when you are being asked a question in an interview, you just have to understand this thing, that if the scenario is about whether a person should have permission to a certain object or not, that is through the profile or the permission set. While we are talking about that, okay, one user should not get to see other users' data, then we are definitely talking about the sharing setting. Correct? So that is how it is. Okay. Now, so in sharing settings, first thing that we just saw is org by default, where you make the data private or public. No, this is just this is what we just saw. We have the option of making the data private or public. So now, if it is public, then it's fine. Then there is no problem. Everyone gets to see the data. That's fine. In case the data is private, then you can have some additional, circumstances or scenarios coming in. Like if the data is private, if it's public, everyone is viewing it, no problem. Then you do not have any additional situations or something like that. But if the data is private, then there can be a situation. Just try and understand this. Data is private. Sonu gets to see 50 accounts. Okay, but we have, let's say, we have Shalini, who is Sonu's manager. Shalini wants to see Sonu's 50 accounts also, but because the data is private, Shalini is not allowed to view because owner is only allowed to see the data, right? We can have this kind of situation. The manager wants to see the data of the subordinate. Private, making a data private means the data becomes private. Only the owner gets to see it. But we will have this kind of requirement where the manager or the supervisor will want to see the data of the subordinate. For that we have an option called grant access using high Okay, here it is. Grant access using hierarchies. Okay. Grant access using hierarchies means whether a manager will have access, though we are making the data private, if this box is checked on, it means the manager will have access to the subordinate's data. So, though the data is being made private, but still my manager will get to see my data. If it is turned off, then the data becomes completely private, even the manager will not see it. Correct? So if you turn it off, then even the manager does not see it. But if your requirement is that at least the manager should get to see the data of the subordinate, then this needs to be checked on. Okay. So this thing comes into picture only if the data is made private. It does not make any sense if the data is public. If it's public, everyone gets to see it, and your manager is also a part of everyone. So it does not make any difference. But if it's private, then this situation comes in. All right. Okay. Now, do you notice one small thing here that all these options are grayed out? You don't even have an option of turning it off. You see this? For these, this option is available for last three, but for the ones at the top, you do not even have an option of turning it off. What is the difference between these three objects and these objects, the other objects? Can anyone just quickly have a look and tell me?
Because they are public.
No, public, so this is also public. There's some difference between the
standard objects.
Yes. So these are all standard objects, the top ones. And last three are custom objects. Alright. So for standard object, grant access using hierarchy is by default checked on, and you don't have an option of turning it off. What does that mean? That means if you are storing some data in these standard objects, then manager will always have access to subordinates data. You do not have an option of turning it off. Okay, so if you are using any of the standard objects to store your data, that standard object data is always shared with the manager. Even if it is private, it is shared with the manager at least. So you cannot make it completely private. But for custom object, you have that option that make it completely private. So in case you have a requirement where you want the data only to be available to one person, even the manager should not see that, for that kind of data, you always have to use a custom object. Standard object will not help you. Got this? Okay. So this is one situation. Manager wants to see data. Now coming to the second situation, this second situation also comes into picture if we are dealing with private data. Second situation can be, let's say Anju and Sridhar. Okay, these two people are there, they have their own 50 accounts. Okay, data is private. Anju does not get to see Sridhar's data. Now, Sridhar is going on leave for 1 month or 15 days. Sridhar is going on a leave for 15 days. Okay, he will be on leave. Now, in the meanwhile, the company wants Anju to take care of Sridhar's data. Now, what is the best way of doing that? It is private, but because he will be on leave for 2 weeks, the company wants Anju to take care of his data or his accounts. Now what is the best way of doing that? She does not have access to Sridhar's data because it's private, right? Sridhar owns those records, and what is the best way of doing it now? How will you manage it?
Share.
Okay. One answer I got is permission set. Permission set is different from sharing settings. That is what we were talking about. Permission set is about whether a person has a permission to a certain object or not. Data sharing is sharing setting. So this is a different concept. Okay. Yeah. Someone said share. What is that? Can you please elaborate?
And sharing the account details with that particular person.
Sharing the account details. So sharing which account? These 50 accounts?
Yeah.
Okay. How will we do that?
Yeah.
Definitely, I mean that is something which we'll have to do, but how will we do that? Data is private, which means she only gets to see the data that she owns. Sridhar owns those 50 accounts. How will she see the accounts? How will I share those?
And we can create an option like public read and write or read only.
If
And
you make it public, then what will happen? Public
yeah, it
will
will
give
be.
access to everyone, right? If I think Navyata also said make it public. But if we make it public, then what will happen? Public means everyone. So for just one such case, because Anju wants to see Sridhar's data, I cannot make all the data public. Okay, fine. So Anju says we can create a group and put both of them in that group. Okay, uh, fine. So good that you people are, you have started thinking, coming up with some solutions. So exactly, as one of you said that we have to share the data, or someone said temporary access. Yeah. So we'll actually, need to think of giving temporary access to Anju to these accounts. Okay. So for that we use another thing called a sharing rule. Okay. What is the sharing rule? This is a small rule which is defined uh, which is used to define temporary exception to OWD. So OWD is a permanent thing. OWD is the generic thing, private or public. But sharing rule can be used as a temporary exception to the OWD. So for some time you can allow some data to be viewed by some other user, right, who is actually not the owner. So this situation also comes into picture if the data is private. If it is public, then there is no such situation. Everyone is viewing the data. But this situation comes into picture if the data is private. So how do we do that? Let's see. Under sharing settings only, the same security control sharing settings. Under sharing settings, you will see sharing rules. Okay. So you have lead sharing rules, account sharing rules, opportunity sharing rules. So whatever sharing whichever object you want the sharing rule to be defined for, you will select that particular sharing rule and define it. Let's say we just talked about accounts need to be shared from one user to the other user. Then we'll have to go and define account sharing rule. Click on new. Give it a rule name, whatever rule name you want to define. Rule 1 or whatever. Okay. Now, whose data needs to be shared? Okay. Let's say with whom you want to share the data. Okay. So this is basically using their roles. Okay. and what level of access you want to give. So this is all temporary setup which we are doing. Once you're, once Sridhar is back, what we can do is we can just deactivate this rule. Then again things will be set to normal. So those are temporary access. Use sharing rules to make automatic exceptions to your organization-wide sharing settings for defined set of users. For some users this can be done, and it's like an automatic exception. Okay, and this last line is very important. You can use sharing rules only to grant wider access to data, not to restrict access. Okay, which means this sharing setting can only be used for giving access, not for restricting access. Correct? So, or in other words, what I just said before getting into the sharing rule, that this situation comes into picture only when the data is private. When it's private, some additional access needs to be given to some people who by default do not have access, then we can use sharing rules. Okay, but if the data is public, then there is no need of such kind of a rule or something like that, because everyone anyhow gets to see the data. Okay, so clear on this? So in the sharing setting there are three things. One, default sharing setting, or this is also called organization wide default, OWD, organization wide default, where you make the data inside a certain object as private or public. So where is that? In the sharing settings you will see the default sharing settings, organization wide default. Okay, just remember these terminologies. So by default, whether the data is going to be private or public, that you define. Grant access using hierarchies. Now you have to define whether the managers will get to see the data of the subordinate or not. That's using grant access using hierarchies. Now this does not help anyhow in case of a standard object. By default the access is given to managers and you don't have to do anything there, because you cannot turn it off. So by default it's turned on. So we just should know this, right? That by default for any data which is getting into the standard object, managers will have the access to the data of the subordinates. And then the sharing rules. So if someone who is not a manager, if that person requires access, by default it's private, but some people need access to the data who are not managers, then use the sharing rule. So this can be used as an exception to the OWD. So that is how it, that is what it is. So three things. Okay, clear on this? Okay. So we have talked about profiles, then we talked about permission sets. So profiles and permission sets are more to do with the permissions, actual permissions which a user requires to access an object, application, tab, anything, right? Then we talked about sharing settings, that is more to do with data sharing. So this is something which a user, these sharing settings are used for controlling data access, right? Not for other things, but controlling the access to the data. Sharing settings. So under sharing settings we have talked about three different concepts: organization by default, uh, grant access using hierarchies, and sharing rules. Okay. So grant access using hierarchies anyhow is a part of OWD only. It's under OWD. Now there's one more thing. So, on the same level, sorry, on the same lines of sharing settings or data sharing, there's one more concept which we need to understand. Some people need access to all data. There will be some users who need access to all data. It's called data admin permissions. Data admin permission means, see, there will be certain users, like for example system administrator, who needs to view all the data in the company. Whether the data is private, public, should not matter to him. He should have access to all the data. right? Or a reporting analyst. For example, there is one guy who actually creates a report of all the sales and marketing activities. If he does not have access to everyone's data, will he be able to create that report? No, right? Even if the data is private, this reporting guy needs access to all the data so that he can generate the reports. Or maybe CEO of the company or the top level management of the company, they need to see all the data, right? So there will be certain users who need access to all data, irrespective of whether the data is private, public. That should not matter to them at all, right? So for them, they need data admin permissions. Okay, what is data admin permissions? Data admin permissions are view all and modify all permissions. Allows users. So view all is a permission which allows users to view all the data in an object, even if OWD is private. Again, this concept again comes into picture if the data is private. If it's public, then everyone gets to see all the data, so it does not make any sense. But view all permission is important. If the data is private also, the users with view all permission will get to see all the data in that object, even for if the OWD is private. Okay, and modify all. Modify all permission allows users to create, edit, delete all the data in an object even if OWD is private. Got it? So people with this kind of permission, view all and modify all, they will be independent of the sharing setting. Does not matter, the sharing setting thing does not matter to them at all. They will get to see all the data, no matter whether a sharing setting of that particular object has been set to private or public. All right. So these view all and modify all permissions are also given through profile. This permission comes from profile. You might have noticed this thing. I'll show you. I'll go to this profile. See, on the profile, when you define the object permissions, you have read, create, edit, delete, and beside that view all and modify all permissions, right? So if a user has got a view all permission, which it means that that user will get to see all the records in that object. For example, if a user has got view all permission on accounts, he will get to see all the accounts. Even if the OWD is set to private, he'll still get to see all the accounts. Okay. Check the boxes in the column if you want users with this profile to have view access to all records of the selected object type regardless of the sharing settings for that object. Correct? And modify all access again gives them the access to read, edit, delete all records. Transfer the records. Got it? So modify all permission gives them the permission to edit or delete all the records in that object, no matter what the sharing setting has to say, or what the sharing setting is defined to. Got this? So this is also pretty common. I mean, we will definitely have some people in the company like system administrator, reporting analyst, top level management people who will need access to all the data. So for them, we will just need to define this view all and modify all permission. That's it. For rest of the people, it's the depending on the sharing settings. If it's private, people will get only the data that they own. If it's public, everyone will get to see all the data. Is that clear? Please let me know if anyone has any question. Okay.
Jit, can you go back to the account, Salesforce account?
Sorry, go back to?
Yeah, that's Salesforce, the profile.
Yeah, tell me now.
Mm.
You can see my screen. I am on Salesforce. You want me to go somewhere else from here?
No, I'm just doing the same thing. My user's profile. And from there, how did you get into system administrator?
Is that fine?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So we have understood these concepts. So let's quickly, look into these concepts once again. So basically, talking about access and permissions of the users. First concept that we have talked about is profiles. Okay. Uh, Profile is collection of permissions. It is a mandatory thing that every user needs to have, and one profile can be assigned to multiple users. That is how we manage permissions for the user. So we create profile for a certain group of user, and then we assign that same profile to all those users in the same profile. All the users who have the same kind of a requirement for permissions. Okay. Then we understand that there will be situations where we need some exceptions. Some people in the profile will need some additional permissions. So we have permission sets to deal with that. We can create a permission set and give it to individual users. These permission sets will allow the users to have additional permissions, which is not given to everyone in the profile, only the people who require it. So that way we don't need to create too many profiles also, and we are able to manage things pretty swiftly with the permission sets. Then once the profile and permission sets get sorted out, the next challenge that comes to us is sharing of the data. 10 people have access to account. That does not mean everyone will get to see all the data in the account. Then we have to control things within the account, right? Now for that we use sharing settings. So every record in Salesforce has an owner. So sharing setting allows us to make the data private or public. Private means only the owner will get to see the data. Public means everyone will get to see the data. If it is public, then you don't have to do much of the things, because you have just kept things open, and it clearly means that you're not that worried or concerned about uh, the data access, right? But if it is private, then you may have certain situations where you need to share the data with some more people who are actually not the owner of the data, like the manager of the owner of the record. So for that we have a grant access using hierarchies option. And second, if the person with whom you want to share the data is not the manager, then use the sharing rule. Okay, so sharing rule allows you to define an exception to the OWD, right? Once we have talked about this, the next concept that we just discussed is some users who need access to all the data irrespective of the sharing settings. So we can give them data admin permissions, which can be given through the profile, and these people will then not depend on the sharing settings. So they will have access to all the data. They will have view all or modify all access, which means they can either view all the records with the view all permission, or they can modify all the records in a certain object, even if the data OWD is set to private. Correct? So that is it. That's about, controlling the access and permissions. So apart from these four concepts, if you understand these four things, you can, do whatever level of what do you say, controlling of access is required. Just keep these four things in mind. First, permissions. Any permission which needs to be given. Point number one is profile. Every user needs to have profile. So go control the profile. If you see that there are certain permissions required by a user which are not required by others in the profile, then definitely think of permission set. If it is somewhere a concept where we are talking about data access for public private, think about sharing settings, OWD. If you are required to give some permission to a user so that he is not affected by the sharing settings, think of data admin permission. That's it. These four concepts, if you know, you should be able to deal with any such situation, right? Right. So that's what we will discuss today. Tomorrow, once we meet, we will start talking about bit of customization. All right. So just go through this, spend some time on the concepts, and I have okay. Fine. I think that application related discussion is something that we'll do next week. So I was planning that we'll do sometime this week, but no, I think we'll do that next week, maybe next Tuesday or Wednesday. So that's it. I think we'll meet tomorrow, same time, same link. All right. Thank you all.